So it's great having you.
Thank you for having me. First, I want to thank you because creativity, at least in my book, is one of the highest forms of being, highest forms of consciousness. So it's a topic that is very close to my heart. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So maybe you can start just by giving us a quick sort of 60-second overview of like what it is that you do day to day. Yeah.
So I guess my day job is a clinical psychologist and a neuroscientist. So I run a clinic on the Upper West Side called the Brain Resource Center. So what we do there is basically neuroscience-based assessments and interventions that basically helps people with brain health, improving self-regulation, improving cognition, and so on. So that's kind of the day-to-day. But we also do neuroscience research and some R&D development in the area of neurotechnology that we've talked about. Yeah,
I've also tried some of this brain tech. You're going to see an example of it, and just so you know, that's it. So it's cool. There's a device that's going to be floating around later that you guys can try it if you want to. It's a little Clockwork Orange-esque, but like in a good way. So maybe I want to start with talking about how the sort of science and study of the brain ties into the study of creativity.
Right.
Yeah.
So aside from my neuroscience and clinical work, I'm very fascinated with that space, that state of mind, that kind of state of consciousness where we connect to some reservoir of creativity. How many people know David Lynch, the late David Lynch? He talked about this place where ideas come from. It is when you quiet your mind, there's a state where you get into and then ideas come to you. And different people, different characters throughout history have tapped into that state using various techniques. For instance, Thomas Edison used to carry this like nap with this metal ball. So as he goes into that state, the metal ball will basically fall and he will come back and he'll have an idea. There's been, Dali did the same thing, Einstein to some extent used a similar methodology. But through neuroscience, we can actually induce such states to some extent. We use neuroscience-based brain monitoring, but also sound and music, which I will talk about more. But it is, to me, it's a very special space, and there are many names for it. We can call it a hypnagogic state, where, you know, that state right before you fall asleep, you have these fragment dreams that kind of only has meaning when you're in it, and if you're not totally asleep, it's not REM sleep. But when you come back out, you have ideas, you have imagery, you have kind of tapped into some other level of consciousness. So in my work, aside from doing what I do with neuroscience, I love entering that state through music, composition, playing, but also sculptures. So this is an example of, this is a rendering actually, but this is the actual sculpture that went through several steps, but I think you had asked me also about like what is the process and how do you go through that. So with music, it's different than, let's say, something like this. So when I do sculptures, for instance, my process at least, although different artists do different kind of sequences, but I don't like to actually think logically. So there is a brain network, actually a large network in the brain called the brain default network. And what it does is, like, when you're not engaged in an active work, logical, or kind of sequencing something that you're engaged with, that's intellectual, you actually tap into that other part of your brain where ideas, symbols, and creativity really comes from. And when I do sculptures, as an example, I like to get to that state before I have a logical thought. So the kinesthetic feelings of touching the clay or plaster, that really drives the state of mind, versus when we do music, because we do music for therapeutic purposes, there's a more intellectual, scientific part to it that you go through some sequences.
That actually, that's helpful, because it ties into my second question, which is sort of, how do you see this this concept transfer across different modalities? And maybe that's sort of what you were getting into.
Right. I mean, I do see that state as being the core now, whether it translates itself to sculptures or music, but that state, I think, is important, and I think it's one of the states that maybe in our culture these days we don't tap into it as much. But tying it back into what we're talking about tonight is like musical bodies and instruments and all that. It's been argued, and I've made that argument, that actually our brain is an instrument. Our physiology, parts of our physiology, in fact, they're based on rhythms. Our respiration rate has a rhythm. Our heart rate has a rhythm. Our brain activity has, many different rhythms that interact. It's kind of a symphony in our brain with all these different frequencies and the way they interact. And so part of what we do in the neurotech kind of company that I've started as well is taking basically real-time brain activity, monitoring in real time, and then using that information in real time to impact the music. In other words, we're closing that loop. Normally, we look at the impact of music on the brain, which is really interesting, but now we're closing that loop by allowing the brain to influence the music in real time, and we call it neuroresponsive music.
Yeah, the way that he sort of explained it to me when I tried the device out was that it's being rewarded in real time for being in a flow state. So let's say you're doing yoga or you're trying to meditate, and you're meditating and you're doing a great job at it. And then you're like, did I put my clothes in the dryer? You don't know the moment when you started sucking at meditating, right? There's no signal to notify you that you're doing a bad job, or to signify when you're doing a good job. And it sounds like, my understanding is that this tech sort of trains your brain Absolutely. In real time to do that.
It's like the instructor you were talking about, but
right,
it's
but
always
nicer.
Present.
Yeah. No, that's nicer. Instructor. God, I hope my Juilliard instructor is not in my brain forever. Although he is. Hello, Mr. Martin. Okay, so maybe you could show us sort of an example of that.
So this is just a rendering of the different.
You can try that on. It's the headphones that go over your head,
we
and
have
then
it here. So later on, if you like to just.
It's really cool.
So different regions are being tapped into for various kind of.
You don't get shocked. I asked that. There's no shocking that happens.
And then here's an example of the interface between, like, this is what you would look at your smartphone or iPad, where your brain activity is interacting with this. And this is an example of a session I was doing. And the idea behind this is that, that if you look at that, when your focus gets better, that goes up and everything moves.
So you have bass that you get rewarded with, and visuals, when you're focused.
Exactly. And then let's say if you get distracted by something, or something happens, could be an external or internal stimuli, then your focus, you may lose your focus. So
he's a neuroscientist, so he's really good at focus. So it's going to take a minute. So, but here on the right-hand side, you can see like sort of your level of focus. And if it drops below this line, the bass stops, so the music continues, but it becomes basically like very unsatisfying music because there's no bass, and you're like,
So you see there, you saw a little
notification. Yeah.
So that's what happened was that I have this device that tells me if my dog is barking. So you see, Toto is barking. So right away after that, I got distracted, and you see how it went down. So really, it's in a way training your brain state and rewarding your brain state in order to teach you how to focus better, or how to meditate better, and how to get to that beautiful state of hypnagogic state that you tap into that reservoir of creativity and so on.
I just feel like I'm too tired for it to think of it, but I feel like there's a tie in between like Toto messing up your flow state and Pavlov, but like some more Prosecco. And
there
I
is
know
a connection.
there's a connection somewhere there.
Absolutely.
So let's round it out with sort of like, so you've built out this company. It's called Vital. It's a very interesting sort of neurotech. Within your creative life, within your professional life, what's something that this community should come and talk to you about?
Well, this whole space, I think the future is about brain training, and whether it's for creativity, for brain health, longevity, this is a space that I think is going to be a space that's going to expand a lot. So anyone who has an interest on an artistic side, on a business side, or just interested to talk about it, I'm happy to discuss and also learn a little bit from ideas you might have.
Kamran, thank you very much.
Thank you.